Hello Guiding Bolt fans, this is Nick, and in today's video we're going to talk about player backgrounds and backstories. I want to talk about how I deal with them and incorporate them into my campaigns, and hopefully provide you with some assistance on doing so as well. Now, to newer DMs, the thought of incorporating these may seem a little daunting. You're already the referee, responsible for providing the adventure framework, setting up for sessions, keeping track of NPCs, remembering the rules or making them up, and now you also have to remember what the players wrote down on their character sheets and somehow tie that into the story as well. Like I said, a little daunting. However, incorporating B&B, see what I did there, can take a campaign from being the world's okayest adventure and turns it into the world's greatest adventure for both the players and you, the DM. Now, for myself as the dungeon master, I'm having fun if my players are having fun. Well, how do I ensure that my players are having fun? I have to get them invested in the story. How do you get them invested? By making their characters part of your world. And how do you make them part of your world? Background and backstories. So here are a few words of wisdom to help you deal with B&B in your D&D campaign. First and most importantly, set expectations with your players. Now, if for some reason you decide not to use background and backstories, that's fine. Just please, please, please let your players know. As a player, nothing is more frustrating than spending hours developing an amazing character backstory just to have it be read once by the DM and then discarded into a folder and lost forever. If you just want to run a Diablo-style hack-and-slash dungeon with minimal roleplay and zero character development, there is nothing wrong with that, as long as your players know that's the plan and they're okay with it also. This first point really shows the importance of having a session zero. That's when conversations around backstory should be happening, and what you'll likely find out is that there's going to be players on both sides of the backstory spectrum. Some players will be content with rolling random personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, and maybe have a sentence or two in their backstory section. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you may have a player that writes a backstory that puts your college papers to shame. However, most will likely be somewhere in the middle, having put some thought into it, but not gone too far in either direction. As the DM, you just have to know who's who so you can plan and act accordingly. Just like the player who writes elaborate backstories doesn't want their time wasted, you don't want to waste your time spending a colossal amount of time writing in a backstory for a murder hobo that's just going to cut the tongue out of your NPC as soon as they try to engage them in conversation. Backstory should play out like a trail of breadcrumbs, not a 5-course meal. The best way to explain this is with an example, so here is an actual, paraphrased, backstory for one of my players that was going through the lost mine of Phandelver. Ella wasn't always known as Ella the Rogue. Before it happened, she was a perfectly content wife and mother of 2 rambunctious twin boys. Then one day her life was turned upside down when they vanished without a trace. Devastated, Ella swore she would find the truth of what happened to her loved ones, never resting until her family was whole again. Her search for answers led her to associate with shadier and shadier individuals, which allowed her to discover a secret code the thieves can't, as well as master a few tricks of the trade along the way. Now, if you're familiar with the adventure Lost Mine of Phandelver, the red brands in Tresendar Manor deal in the sale and trade of humanoids. It would have been really easy for me to have Ella's family locked up in the prison and found in just a few sessions. That's the 5-course meal approach. Shove everything down the player's throat in as few sessions as possible, and then wash your hands of the backstory. Now, if you were only going to do the Lost Mine of Phandelver and then be done with the campaign, that may not be a bad route to take. However, I knew we were going to be playing past this adventure. If I had resolved her character's whole backstory before the adventure even got off the ground, then she wouldn't have much to look forward to. She may even decide that with her character's purpose achieved, there's no point to play the character any longer and want to roll a new one. The route that I took instead was, as Ella was searching the room for loot, she discovered articles of clothing that had belonged to her children. And just like that, the hunt was on. Not only was Ella fully invested, but the rest of the party was also sucked in as well, wanting to help in whatever way they could, or assist their friend in whatever way that they could, to find her family. As the adventure progressed, I continued to leave little crumbs for the players, and every crumb closer they got to discovering the truth, the more and more excited the players were. You can lead a PC to a plot hook, but you can't make them take the bait. I'm sure you've all heard a similar proverb a million times, but if not, it means that you can give someone an opportunity, but not force them to take it. The short explanation here is if you write in backstory information for a player and they don't seem interested or don't take the bait, just move on. You'll still have it in your back pocket should they decide to pick it back up later. Multiple times I've presented players with information based on their backstory and expected them to follow a certain path or react in a certain way, only to have them completely disregard it and go in a totally opposite direction. So for example, a character from another Lost Mine of Phandelver adventure had in their backstory that she was separated from her people at a young age after an orc raiding party attacked her tribe. She managed to survive by fleeing into the woods and surviving on her knowledge of nature, thus becoming an outlander. So I thought, well, that's perfect because there is a party of orcs at Wyvern Tor. I'll just have her recognize the orc tribe symbol as the same tribe that attacked her village and then go from there. So the party took the initial bait and they headed out to avenge her people, and for a little added drama when they got there, the orcs were already locked in combat with none other than members from her tribe, and they were losing badly. After barely defeating the orcs and ogre, they learned that members of her tribe had managed to survive, and ever since they've been roaming the Sword Mountains, exacting revenge and searching for surviving members of their tribe. Now, I had another small one-shot planned, and I totally expected them to accompany her tribe and develop and play out some of her other backstory components, but instead, she and the party wanted to head back to Old Aloe Well, which is, part of, if you're familiar with the adventure, kind of what set them down that path, and continue on with Cost, which is a red-robed mage. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's pretty much par for the course for a DM to plan something and then the players to do the exact opposite. In the end, I'm actually glad that they went this route because it allowed me to tie it in later, or tie in another character's backstory later and then kind of weave them together. So again, in the end it worked out. Flaws are like buttholes. Everyone has one and they all stink. Or do they? There's a reason flaws are listed on the front of the character sheet. They're a very important part of a character's backstory. After all, it's part of what makes their character who they are, and depending on where your players fall on the backstory spectrum, the personality traits, ideals, flaws, and bonds may be all that you have to work with. Flaws are actually one of my favorite components of 5th edition. For new players that may not be comfortable yet with role-playing, playing to their character flaw is a great icebreaker, and it also provides an in-game incentive in the form of inspiration. Now, from the DM's perspective, I like to start using character flaws right from the start. Thinking of ways to allow the characters to play to them early on is a good way to keep them involved, and it also buys you time to start working on incorporating their backstory if they have one. So for example, if one of the characters enjoys their ale a little too much, then there's a good chance that they're going to find a barrel of Dwarven Stout or Elvish wine very early on. If one of them can't walk away from a fight without being, or if they're insulted, then they're probably going to encounter an obnoxious NPC that's going to call the character out. Bottom line, even if your players don't really do backstories, try to tie in the top right section of their character sheet instead. Try to bring the character's background to the foreground. Every character has a background, and a character's background is so important that it's actually listed right after the class and level at the tippy-top section of each character sheet. If you're dealing with new players, then most likely the character's background is what drove their personality trait, ideal, bond, and flaw. My last tip for integrating player characters into your world is to know each one of their backgrounds. Now, if you crack open the Player's Handbook and flip over to page 125, you'll be able to review all the potential character backgrounds available. There is the Acolyte, Charlatan, Criminal, Entertainer, Folk Hero, Guild Artisan, Hermit, Noble, Outlander, Sage, Sailor, Soldier, and Urchin. Now, you don't have to memorize each one of those, but you should at least read through the ones that your players have selected for their characters. If your players didn't give you much background or backstory information to work with, then this section will at least give you something to go on. Pay special attention to the feature section of each of the backgrounds. That is what gives each character a special characteristic based on the background that they've selected. So for instance, the discovery feature of the hermit background states that a character has made a unique and powerful discovery that's to be worked out between the player and the DM. So as you can see, with a little bit of planning, each one of the background features provides an easy way to start making your world feel like their world. Alright, Guiding Bolt fans, that's all I have for today. I hope this aids you in incorporating players' backgrounds and backstories into your campaigns. If you have any questions, you know where to leave them. I'd also like to hear additional tips from fellow DMs, as well as any fun stories that players might have about their DM incorporating their backstory. Remember to hit that subscribe button so you can hear one of our angelic voices next week. As always, thanks for watching, and keep tabletopping.